two friends. My name is Constance, and this is Cruelty-Free Musings. Welcome back to my channel, and to another Knit With Me While I Tell Stories video. I wanted to record something today, and I wanted to do something not beauty related. So here we are. I have my knitting. It's very pretty. And hopefully it will not take too much of my attention, although it might. There's no telling. So, today I will be telling you the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because I thought that that would be a good thing to talk about. So the background of Knit With Me While I Tell Stories, this was inspired by Hannah of Smoky Glow. She sometimes wants to record videos, but she doesn't have the energy to put on makeup, so she just sits down in front of her camera with no makeup on, and she tells a story about her life. And it is usually hilarious. I need to actually be doing something here. Right? Yes. Okay. And it's the 2, so 6. 2, 4, 6. All right. Good sign. We're already undoing what we're doing. All right. So her stories about her life are hilarious. She has lived a very interesting life. She has had many, one might say, mishaps. I have not had that interesting of a life, but I do know an awful lot of stories, so I figured I can still do this same Hannah Smoky Glow inspired thing where I get on camera and I knit and I tell you a story. So let's start as all fairy tales start. Once upon a time, there was a queen, and she was married to a king, and they had no children. 2, 4, 6, 7. And they wanted to have a child very much. The queen was very beautiful and very sweet, but the lack of a child for her husband and the lack of an heir for the throne really weighed on her and made her pine and waste away. So she was, we are, off to a spectacular start as usual. All right. There are 4 stitches there, and there should be 6. Okay, so her husband loved her very much and wanted anything for her, and also wanted a child, but partly wanted a child just because she wanted it so badly. It is important to have an heir to the throne, but also it's very important to have a happy home and a happy wife. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Aha, that's where the 2 stitches are. Okay. So the queen was pining, not eating, staring out the window, being grieved, and she had her embroidery in her hands, and she was not paying attention to what she was doing, in, the way that you don't when you are concerned about what you are thinking about rather than what you are doing. And she pricked her finger with her embroidery needle. Now, embroidery needles can be quite sharp. Knitting needles, not really sharp. Embroidery needles, quite sharp. So she pricked her finger on her needle, and 3 drops of blood welled out of her finger and dropped onto the snow on the windowsill. Did I mention that it was winter? It was winter. And they were also quite far north, and so the queen saw the blood on the snow on the windowsill. And she said, "Alas, if only I had a daughter fair as snow, with lips red as blood, and with hair dark as the ebony of the windowsill, and some good fairy wandering through the world heard her wish and decided to grant it. And sure enough, the queen became pregnant and she had a daughter. As many fairy tales start, the birth of a daughter is the start of a lot of trouble. I'm just saying it's a trend. It's a pretty large trend. So so she becomes pregnant, she has a daughter, and the king and the queen rejoice briefly. And then the queen becomes ill and she dies. And this is very sad. And the king mourns. And then, now the stories are slightly different here. Some stories say that there was an enchantress in the kingdom who was evil and schemed to take over the kingdom when the king died. And so she entrapped him. So that is one story. Falls into the evil stepmother trope. But there is another sort of story, which is that the king, after he had grieved, saw a beautiful maiden among the daughters of his nobles and decided to remarry. After all, the queen was very beautiful and he missed her companionship, and he thought perhaps that this daughter of nobility would also be a good companion to his for his bosom. Well, they got married, and the stories do tend to agree that it didn't go well for Snow White. She was a beautiful child. She grew up into being a beautiful maiden. And the queen, who had been beautiful in her youth, but was now not young, became jealous of the daughter. Now, this queen happened to have a magic mirror, and this magic mirror would answer a question set to it by anyone. So she was in the habit, vain minx that she was, this queen, stepmother to Snow White, she was in the habit of asking her magic mirror once a day, every day, "Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And for many, many years, the answer was very satisfactory to her ego. It was always, "My queen, you are the fairest of them all." But then, suddenly, as Snow White began to mature and hit marriageable age, suddenly the answer began to change. She still asked the question, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror began to answer, "My queen, Snow White, is the fairest of them all." Now this did not make the queen happy, and maybe she had been a sorceress all along, or an enchantress, and maybe she hadn't. But regardless, she was not happy about this, and she decided to find some other means of removing this troublesome stepdaughter who was so very beautiful. She thought that this stepdaughter was very inconvenient, and she decided that she would get rid of her permanently. Now, perhaps the king was dead at this point. Perhaps he was just very firmly under his wife's thumb. Nevertheless, the queen decided that it would be a great plan if she were to kill Snow White. Or rather, since a queen cannot get her hands dirty herself, obviously, to have her killed. So the queen had a huntsman who was entirely loyal to her and was not concerned at all with the king. He was devoted to the queen entirely, and he said, "Yes, my lady, whatever you wish for me, I will do." And she said, "My huntsman, I have a great desire for a fair maiden's heart. I believe that eating a fair maiden's heart will make me young again and give me all of the beauty that formerly belonged to the maiden." You can see where the rumors of her being a sorceress / enchantress came from, right? Very traditional blood sacrifice sort of theme going on here. So the huntsman said, "Yes, ma'am. Did you have a particular maiden in mind?" And she said, "Yeah, my stepdaughter. Take her into the woods. Kill her. Bring back her heart to me so that I can eat it." I think Disney left this part out. Like, I don't remember there being a heart in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's definitely there in the book, though. So, if you're ever wondering about the gory details, going back to Hans Christian Andersen and the Brothers Grimm, they're great sources for gory details, it turns out. So the huntsman accompanies Snow White into the woods on a hunting expedition. As you might expect of a huntsman, his job is to accompany the royals into the woods and pick up whatever they kill and dress it and bring it back to the palace. Somehow the princess has no other entourage, or they somehow. Oh, that was in frame the entire time. Sorry, that's my mic. Okay. Um, that will be better, I think. All right. So, nope, it's still there. Okay, Mike is no longer in frame. All right. So they perhaps they have no other entourage somehow. Very unlikely. Or perhaps they get separated somehow from the entourage. Seems a little unlikely, but definitely possible for a scheming huntsman. So they are separated in the dark woods, alone. And the huntsman pulls out the knife to do what the queen asked him / told him to do. And Snow White looks terrified, begs for her life, and his heart is melted by the pleas of the young maiden. And he's like, all right, fine, don't show your face in the kingdom ever again, and just like run away, leave, just go somewhere else. Go somewhere else. This actually is something that Disney did very well. The huntsman scene is legit terrifying, and Snow White she looks terrified, and she runs away into the woods very convincingly. And it looks like the entire wood is trying to attack her to add more to the feeling of terror. So she is running off into the woods, and meanwhile the huntsman is hunting a deer. And he kills a deer, and he cuts out the heart, and he brings the heart back to the queen in a little casket. And he says, my queen, here is the heart which you demanded of me, so that you may eat it and have your youth return. And the queen eats the heart and is satisfied for a time. But then she returns to her magic mirror. Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? My queen, Snow White is still the fairest of them all. She's supposed to be dead. Why is she not dead? Well, I've already answered my one question for the day, so ask me tomorrow. Magic mirrors are notorious legalists. Just in case you're one. In case you ever get the chance to talk with a magic mirror, they are not, they're like genies. They're like, no, I mean, the terms in my contract say that I only have to answer one question a day, and I have to answer it truthfully, but I don't have to answer it honestly. So, you get a lot of the same sort of sass with all magic servants. So, the queen has to wait for the next day to ask where Snow White is. Well, Snow White has stumbled into a little cottage, which has dwarfs in it, it turns out. And their house is a little bit of a wreck because, come on, it's 7 bachelors. They work in a mine. It's dirty. They track it all home. They don't do a great job of cleaning up after themselves. And she is just trying to get out of this horrible rainstorm and away from all of the scary critter eyes that are terrorizing her. And so She runs into the cottage, and she's very pleased to find that there is a room with 7 small beds in it, which will comfortably accommodate her if she stretches across 2 or 3 of them. So, when the dwarves come home from work, which is late because they work in a mine and it's, you know, hard and dirty and intensive labor, they come home, they discover their door open, and they think to themselves, we have a home invader. We should try and figure this out. So they are on high alert, and they fan out and they search the house. And they go through the kitchen, and they find nothing. And they go through the den, and they find nothing. And they go up the stairs, and they begin to hear something. Maybe, perhaps, a subtle snore. We'll forgive the princess. She had a very difficult day, right? Running away. Very difficult. So, being terrified, having your life threatened, it's exhausting, and you can be forgiven for sleeping so hard that you snore. So, they're like, aha, whoever it is, they're in the bedroom. And they have their weapons at the ready. Remember, they work in a mine. They have pickaxes, which are real sharp because they're meant to dig gemstones out of caves, out of rock. So they have these implements that are designed to hit rock and break rock. Very, very effective weapons. So they are prepared to batter whoever this is in the bedroom. And they rush in, and the light falls on Snow White as they raise the lantern, and they're all prepared, and then they're like, whoa, this girl's real pretty. Maybe she's actually harmless. And I don't know why those two things are connected. Why very pretty things are assumed to be harmless and very pretty individuals. But perhaps it's the vulnerability of young women in particular that makes them that makes people always assume that they are fragile. And certainly Snow White in this story so far has done nothing to prove that she is not in fact fragile. So they can't kill her. They don't swing a single pickaxe at her head. They're like, maybe she'll agree to serve us. Maybe she can, cook us decent meals. And, make the house more presentable. So, they decide on it. Snow White wakes up terrified at seeing these small men surrounded and holding pickaxes in a menacing fashion. And she agrees to whatever they ask. And what they ask is for her to become their servant, to cook and to clean and to not leave the cottage. She's confined to the cottage pretty stringently. So, it's 3 rooms, in case I didn't make that clear. 3 rooms and a little fenced-in yard. There's a kitchen, a sort of sitting, eating area, and then you go upstairs and the bedroom is basically the entire attic. So she goes from a palace to living in a teeny tiny squalid little cottage. But not dying seems like a great idea to her, so she's like, okay, all right, I'll do it. I'll cook and I'll clean for you. And somehow it turns out that this princess has acquired a lot of domestic skills. In some stories, she has been put to work as a maidservant by her stepmother for many years at this point. She has been a scullery maid, she has been a cook's assistant, she has been the person scrubbing the floors. So this is nothing new to her. According to the according to the Disney story, certainly. So she it's a smaller place, but it seems more comfortable than where she has been sleeping, than her circumstances before. She was supposed to be the daughter of the king, a princess, and instead she is a maidservant. So she's like, okay, instead of being a maidservant in my father's house, now I'm a maidservant in a dwarf cottage, and I'll cook and clean for them. All right. So she's a sweet girl. She takes off after her mother. She is very, very willing very willing and good-hearted in everything that she does. And so she makes it spotless. She does get pretty grubby in the process. She is not, that miraculous thing that happens when you're cleaning, where at the end of the process, your house may be clean, but you're filthy. Yeah, that happens to her. So she gets really grubby. But she keeps the house spotless, and the vegetable garden becomes perfectly tended and tidy, and the dwarves are super happy about the delicious meals that they're eating, and also, wow, this super pretty girl who is just happy with her life and goes about singing and, being charming with the birds. Like, if you take the Disney portrayal as like a factual representation of the stories, the wildlife in the surrounding forest all love Snow White, and they come and they brighten up the cottage with their song, and the cottage just generally becomes a beautiful place for the dwarves to come home to, and they're like, man, wow, aren't girls great? They are. They make houses so much nicer to live in. And they're like, we would happily keep Snow White with us for all time. But of course, that's not how fairy tales work. So, the queen. Back to the queen. She asks her magic mirror, "Magic mirror on the wall, where is the fairest one of all?" Because she's interested in Snow White's whereabouts. Or if it's not Snow White, who else does she have to worry about and defend her place as the most beautiful in this entire kingdom against? Well, it turns out that it's still Snow White, and the magic mirror tells her, "My queen, she's in a cottage in the woods." She's like, "A cottage? What? Someone took her in? And the huntsman deceived me? He's on my list. Alright, but we'll deal with him later." So, she disguises herself. First, she she is either a full-blown sorceress by this point, or she does some research at this point into what she needs to do to get rid of this problematic Snow White. She decides, what I will do is I will make the most beautiful enchanted laces. And I will say, my sweet girl, they tie themselves. You don't have to do anything. You just you lace them through the back of your corset, and then they will tighten themselves. And you don't have to have an extra person there to lace up your corset. Isn't that fantastic? But of course, the laces are designed to kill Snow White. They, so, she spends some time figuring out how to get this enchantment into these corset laces. And so she disguises herself as an old peddler woman, and she goes into the cottage in the woods, and she says to Snow White, Snow White, my dear, you must be Snow White, you are as fair as the driven snow. Yes, yes, of course. And so of course you are named Snow White. My dear Snow White, I have these beautiful laces for sale. And Snow White says, well, I don't have any money. See, the dwarves, did I mention that Snow White is not bright? She's not bright. She says, see, the dwarves that I live with, they don't give me any money. They provide everything that I need to cook and to clean. And then I'm not allowed to leave the grounds. And the peddler woman says, oh, please, accept it as a gift. They are surely nothing less than these beautiful laces would do to grace your beautiful and elegant figure. Please accept them as a gift from me to you. And Snow White is like, okay, all right, yeah, that sounds good. Meanwhile, no, checking, no critical thoughts occurring in her brain at all. It's weird that someone would just give me anything. I guess even though she's been treated as a servant, she still doesn't have to live on her own, and she's not aware of the value of money and the necessity of money somehow. So she accepts these laces as a gift, and the peasant woman says, yes, let me put them into your dress right at the moment. And Snow White says, yes, yes, by all means. And so the old woman peddler takes the old laces out of the corset, and she puts the new laces in, and she says, now, let them tighten themselves. And sure enough, the laces tighten and tighten and tighten and tighten and tighten until Snow White can't breathe, and then she faints and appears to die before the old woman's eyes. And the queen is satisfied by this, and she decides to return to the palace, gloating and happy about a job well done. Well, the dwarves come home that night, and they see her apparently dead, and they're like, oh my goodness, we have to do something about this. And they cut the laces on her corset, and she breathes. She takes a breath. And they're like, oh, thank goodness. We thought we lost you. Don't take gifts from strangers in the forest. Okay? It's dangerous. All right? People aren't trustworthy. And she's like, okay. And she's probably thinking, meanwhile, you're trustworthy. I trust you. Why am I not supposed to trust other people? As I said, not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So, the next day, the queen asks her magic mirror, 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 on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? And she's excited. She's like so happy and expecting the best of news, expecting to hear once again, my queen, you are the fairest in the land. No, not what happens. Instead, she hears, my queen Snow White is the fairest in the land. She's like, what? I thought I killed her. Why? How is she still alive? Magic Mirror's like, I already answered my question for the day. I'm gonna peace out. Bye. So, the queen decides that she needs something a little bit more permanent this time. So she's like, you know what? You know what will work? A poisoned apple. So she cuts an apple in half, and she poisons one half of the apple, and she turns it cherry red. The most beautiful red apple that ever was. And then she sticks it back together with the other half, which is white as snow. Lots of symbolism here, you can tell. There are probably papers written about this, red half of the apple and white half of the apple. But anyway, she sticks them back together, and she does, magic-y things. And she makes it look like new. So she makes it look like one single apple. Apparently I have been talking for a long time, because my phone just split the video into two parts. So if you noticed a jump at any point here, that's why. So she has cut the apple and stuck it back together, and she has made it look like a new apple, and it's perfect and it's beautiful. And meanwhile, there's this white half which is harmless, and there's this red half which is super deadly. And she's like, okay, we have it. We're gonna try again. We're gonna kill her this time. Okay? So she disguises herself again as the old peddler woman, and she goes to the cottage in the woods. My dear Snow White, please accept this beautiful apple from me. And Snow White has learned a little bit about canniness, and she says, Mother, it's not that I don't trust you, but I had a bad experience with an old peddler woman, not that long ago, and I'm not sure that I should be accepting anything from anyone. So she's trying. She's trying. She's working hard against her trusting self. And the old peddler woman says, I will prove to you that it is utterly harmless, and she cuts the apple in half and she eats the white half. She says, see, my dear, it is perfectly harmless, and is it not? The most beautiful red apple that you have ever seen. Here, taste it. Just a bite. And Snow White says, well, I mean, I guess you can't poison half an apple, right? So she decides to take a bite. And as soon as her teeth close around the bite, she faints and she drops down as if she is completely dead. So she's not able to chew it, is the point in the fairy tale. And the dwarves come home once again. The peddler woman has gone away, cackling in glee. Yes, ha 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 ha. I have killed her. I have gotten rid of the competitor. And the dwarfs come home later that day and they are horrified and they try everything. They try splashing water on Snow White's face. They try cutting her laces. That worked before. It didn't work this time. And they are horrified. They're like, no. We tried. We tried to protect you. You just can't stop accepting gifts from people. Why? So they build a coffin for her. It's a glass coffin. And they take her into the woods and they put her in a beautiful clearing and they decide to mourn her for a year. And then it happens that a prince is riding through the forest one day and he sees Snow White and he is stunned by her beauty. He's like, no, I missed being able to make this most beautiful woman my bride because I encountered her and then she's dead. But you, Sir Dwarf, do you have any plans for that coffin? Because I could, take her back to my kingdom and give her a proper burial if you're, willing to do that. And I don't know what his actual plan was. Maybe he was like, there are necromancers, I can raise her from the dead. But in any case, the dwarfs decide, all right, we'll strike a deal with you. We will let you take this coffin with Snow White and take her back to your kingdom. And because, I guess they're done mourning. They're like, we're just losing a day's productivity out of whoever, whatever dwarf is sitting by her coffin. So, I mean, I guess we've decided that she's not coming back to life this time and we can pass on her corpse to someone else. He seems very sincere, this prince. I do not have an explanation for any of this. None of it sounds reasonable to me at all. I don't know why the prince wanted a corpse. I don't know why the dwarfs decided to apparently sell a glass coffin containing their former maid to a prince. But that's the story. So the prince comes back with a wagon and he has the dwarfs load the coffin into the wagon, and he takes it back to his kingdom, different kingdom. And along the way, the wagon hits a bump, and the bite of apple, which has been in Snow White's mouth this entire time, length of time indeterminate, because fairy tales could be like a month, could be a year. But regardless, this bite of apple gets bounced out of Snow White's mouth somehow while the wagon is going over some rough territory. And she coughs. And then she wakes up. And she's like, why am I in a glass box? What's going on? And meanwhile, the prince is overjoyed. He's like, wow, the beautiful maiden woke up. Wasn't this a great roll of the dice? She just came back to life, and now I can have the beautiful maiden to be my wife. So he is like, beautiful maiden, will you marry me? And she's like, sure. I mean, it's better than my stepmother trying to kill me all the time. And so they go back to his kingdom, and they throw a party. They have a wedding, and they invite all of the neighboring royalty. And guess what happens? Well, it turns out that one of the people that they invite is Snow White's stepmother. And I am sure that there is a gruesome end to this stepmother. I am certain of it. Perhaps this is one where she is made to dance in red hot shoes until the end of the banquet / until she drops dead. But regardless, Snow White's stepmother attends the wedding and comes to a gory end, and Snow White and her husband, Prince Charming, the prince, live happily ever after. The end, I guess. So, I hope you enjoyed, or learned something, or both. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you feel like, and goodbye for now.